Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, good. So inshallah we'll get started. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيد المرسلين. يا خاتم النبيين. يا شفيع المذنبين. يا أنيس الغريبين. يا رحمة للعالمين. صلى الله عليه وسلم. صلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. Yeah, we'll get started inshallah. Today's class will be a little bit shorter. Normally we go till 3 because there's a program up in Suwannee that I have to, or Lawrenceville, that I have to be at by Melbourne. So, last week, and this is again a continuation of Ahlul Bayt. So, we spoke about the Khilafah of Imam Hasan AS, who is the 5th Khilafah Rashidin. Most of us like stopping at 4, but if we stop at 4, then the Sahih Hadith of Rasulullah, so some of the authentic narration of Rasulullah, where he said that the Khilafah is for 30 years, would not be completed. So it was Imam Hasan AS who completes that 30 years. And then he hands over the rule. And the reason I keep reiterating these things is that they're very important because of the environment that we're in. These are things that are easy to forget, and when we forget them, then in essence we are belittling the position and the status of Ahlul Bayt. Because if we look at the history, if we look at what Rasulullah ﷺ said and about them, about all of these things, then these are important things to note and to remember. And when you have any situation, historically or even now, if you have one position, you always have the opposite position. And this is why in the Quran, when we talk about Musa AS, we talk about Fir'aun. When we talk about various people that were righteous, we also talk about those that were not righteous. Because it's not just important to know what you need to do, it is also important to know what you don't need to be doing. It's important to know, the direction you should go in, but, if you don't know that other directions are deviations, then it's easy to get lost. And this is, again, as we keep saying, this is the situation we find the Ummah in today. And so last week we spoke mainly about Marwan bin Hakam, who is the cousin of Uthman, also his son-in-law. But he was a very treacherous, very, I guess easy to say in English, very evil person. He could not open his mouth without cursing Ali, radiallahu anhu. And one of the reasons it's important because people say, well, what's the significance of talking about these people? And this gets back to why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Fir'aun, why he mentions Namrud, why he mentions all these other people. And this also gets back to where Rasulullah ﷺ talks about the deceptions to come. And so those deceptions will get harder and harder to differentiate. Even people that, like with Fir'aun and Musa AS today, it's so easy for us to differentiate who's who. But if you think about it, all of those punishments that were coming on the people of Fir'aun at that time, and yet they still didn't understand. They always wrote that off to some explanation, this is some natural phenomenon or something or that, or this or that. And if you read the Quran, they knew better, because whenever the punishments would come, they would go to Musa AS and they would say to him that if you remove this punishment from us, then we will believe in you and free the children of Israel. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the next verse that when they would, after a certain time, the punishment would be removed, what would they do? Go back on their word. They wouldn't accept. So the thing is, when we read that, we get astonished as to why they couldn't believe. Why wouldn't they believe? But the problem is, the same thing is going on in front of us, and we don't realize it. I mean, we don't have to look far. We don't have to look far in history. I mean, things going on right now. And people still. And this is one of the things that has crept into the Ummah, that was really pushed early on, right after the Khilafah, in order to solidify the power and control of the rulers over the people, is that you make them passive against the rulers, and then the rulers don't have to worry about them. And I'm going to come to that point. But this is also why it's so important to understand who Marwan is, who his father was. Because Marwan especially, he was at one time the leader of the Muslims. If you look at Banu Umayyah, he, after Yazid dies from cirrhosis, then because he was a drunkard, his son took over, or his son was appointed as king. His son's name was Mawiyah. His son was a very decent person. So his son, when he's handed over the kingdom, he goes on the throne, and the first statement he makes is, he says that, how can I accept this position when I have seen what my father did to the household of Rasulullah to attain it and to keep it? And he advocates the throne. So you end up having a civil war within, and he dies shortly thereafter, but you have a civil war within Banu Umayyah as to who's going to have power now. And Marwan wins out in that civil war and becomes the leader, and then he's the leader for less than a year before he dies, and then Abdul Malik, his oldest son, becomes the king. Okay? So these are all kings, because the Rasulullah said that they were kings. But you have people today who worship authority, or rather misplaced authority. They worship people that hold positions or superficial positions of leadership. And so, they'll talk about, oh, see, he was the leader of the Muslims, you can't say anything against the leader. This is the same thing that various kings today, which are tyrants, and presidents and prime ministers and all of these in the Muslim world, you can't fight against the leader. You can't say anything against the leader. He was such a good person because he was the leader. If he wasn't good, then why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow him to be the leader? It's sort of like that prosperity gospel where, he's so rich, God must love him. So, the same mindset. But this gets back again to Fir'aun as well. During that time, you had people from Bani Israel who were in awe of Fir'aun. And Qarun. And Qarun was from Bani Israel. But he was made very wealthy because he was, he was the internal spy of Fir'aun upon Bani Israel. And he was made very wealthy, and people were so in awe of him. And again, because he held a position of power and authority. And we see, their end. So this is also, again, why it's so important to know this history, to know these people, so we can differentiate who is who. Just because they're the leader doesn't mean that they're any good. Yes, there were kings that had some decency. There were kings that were very decent, such as Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahmatullah alayh, and a few others. Not very many, but a few others. Most of them were willing, not just willing, but also did anything and everything to keep their positions, including killing the Muslims, assassinating Muslims, and especially assassinating Ahlul Bayt, people from the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they knew that these were the people who could truly overturn their power. So a lot of things that we talked about last week, as we go forward, we will, I'll kind of reiterate those points as they come up, because we kind of focus just on Marwan and the various things, and the important thing here, because a lot of people say, oh, see, no, Hakam was a companion of Rasulullah, the father of Marwan. Some of them even say that Marwan was a companion of Rasulullah. Some of them are willing to acknowledge, no, he wasn't. But, companionship of Rasulullah isn't simply someone who saw him. Otherwise, Abu Jahl would also be a companion. Abu Lahab would also be a companion. Companionship is one who saw him with Iman and dies on that Iman. And that Iman has to be accepted by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, otherwise, if Allah and the Messenger don't accept that Iman, then, Abdullah ibn Ubay would also be a companion. He's the leader of the hypocrites. So Hakam, the father of Marwan, is the one who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam exiled. And as I mentioned last week, people differ onto exactly why he was exiled from Medina and he was sent to Taif. But everybody agrees that he used to mock Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would walk, he would mock him, thinking he wasn't seeing him. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam called him out and said, walk like this. And of course, when you mock somebody, as I said last week, you exaggerate things. If I'm mocking the way somebody walks, I exaggerate the way they walk. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, couldn't, be like this. And he walked like that his whole life then. And most people also agree, everybody agrees on that. Most people agree that he would listen in on the secret conversations of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he was having with various companions, and then go and tell everybody what he was talking about. And then, we have to, when we think of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have to remember he is rahmatul lil alameen. He is a mercy to all of creation. So not only to humans, but to everything. He is the one who made the statement that anyone, who is exiled or doesn't have any place to stay, come and we will provide you a place to stay. We will take you in. If no one else will take you in, we will take you in. He is the one who is exiling him. And he's the only one who was ever exiled by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. People, even Wahshi, whose Iman Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted, but he simply said to him, he said, look, just don't come in front of me, because it reminds me of my uncle. Wahshi, of course, is the one who killed Hamza radiallahu anhu in Uhud. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam forgives him, accepts him, but simply says, makes a request, don't come in front of me. He didn't exile him. Here with Hakam, he's exiled. And people are, oh, no, he wasn't exiled. Well, you look at the hadith, and yes, he was. They want to quote things from history. It's interesting. These same people, when you quote something from history, say, oh, that's just history. Here, they're trying to use history to debunk hadith. And even if none of this was as far as the exile and him mocking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if none of that was true, which it is, but even if it wasn't, we have the other hadith where Bibi Aisha Siddiqa is telling Hakam, and these are Sahih hadith, telling Marwan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his curse upon him and his father through the lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The lana of Allah through the lips of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But people still want to praise him, still simply because he was the leader, which shows which again, these are the same people who want to accuse everybody else of shirk, but them worshiping the leader is not shirk. That's what it boils down to. So just kind of, that was a little refresher from last week and just things to remember and a little bit different perspective. But as we mentioned, after Imam Hasan AS hands over the rule, he comes back, and then when he does this, he makes this khutbah, he gives his khutbah in front of his army, and it's telling them that, you gave me allegiance, and part of that allegiance was that you would make peace with, you would fight against anyone who I fought against, and you would make peace with anyone who I made peace with. And now that I've made peace with Muawiyah, then you also obligated, according to the allegiance you gave to me, to make peace with him. And as I said, there were conditions, and we mentioned those 5 conditions. The first one being that you will rule according to the Quran and the Sunnah. The second one being that the cursing of Ali has to stop, and that one he compromised in which, because Muawiyah said, I can only speak about myself, I can't speak about anybody else. So he said, fine. And then that there would be no retaliation against the supporters of Ali or the supporters of Imam Hasan AS. And that the governors or the appointees of Muawiyah would have no authority over the household of Rasulullah, so Imam Hasan and Imam Hussein and their descendants. And then the last one being that Muawiyah would not appoint anyone as his successor, and that after him the decision would come back to the Shura or come back to Imam Hasan AS. So these were the conditions which, when we look at them as we speak about them, they were not met. But again, that does not absolve Muawiyah from being a companion. Incurring the curse of Allah and the curse of Rasulullah does exempt Hakam from being the companion of Rasulullah. And one point here as well, there are those who, when you mention this to them, that see Rasulullah sent lana upon Hakam and his progeny except those who believe, which would be Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who is the grandson of Marwan. So they'll bring the hadith of Rasulullah and they'll say that, see, Rasulullah said that, he said that, oh Allah, if I send lana on anybody, then make that a blessing for them. So see, but as usual, when they want to deceive people, this is only half the hadith. He said, if I send lana upon anybody, make that into a blessing for them if they are not deserving of it. That changes the whole meaning of what's being said. So here we have Rasulullah sending lana on Hakam and his progeny, except those that believe. And then you have the companions, including the wife of Rasulullah, Bibi Aisha Siddiqa, from whom Rasulullah said, take your half of your religion from her, affirming that that he was deserving of this. And again, this isn't from the books of history, this is from the books of hadith. And the hadiths here, they aren't questionable hadiths, these are authentic narrations. And you can look in Bukhari, you can look in Nisa'i, Hakam, Mustadrak, and various other books. So when you look at what the muhaddiseen or the scholars of hadith said about this, they said, these aren't disputable narrations. There are a few other things that will, again, as we go forward, we'll kind of hit upon. But also we have to keep remembering Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh. He said what? He said that no one will love you except for a believer, and no one will have animosity against you except for a hypocrite. And the companions, Abu Sayyid Khudri radiallahu anhu, as well as Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, and various other companions made that statement that, during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, revelation would come and we'd know who's who. But now, we take the name of Ali and we can tell who is who simply by their faces. And actually, Abdul Aziz Muhaddis Adelbi, rahmatullah alayh. So, Muhaddis of Hind, this is late 1800s. So he is actually, no, early 1800s, not late 1800s, early 1800s. And well-known scholar in the subcontinent, accepted pretty much by all variations of groups. The Deobandis accept him, Barelvis accept him, the Al-Hadith accept him, pretty much all of them accept him. Okay? He wrote a book, Fatawa Azizia. And in that he says that it is incumbent upon those that love Ahlul Bayt. So this is an incumbency, or an incumbent aspect of loving the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when you hear the name of Marwan, that you send the curse of Allah upon him. Otherwise, your love for Ahlul Bayt becomes questionable. Because again, this was a person who morning and evening was cursing Ali. So this is the environment in which Imam Hasan AS returns to Medina Munawwara. Because again, Hakam is the governor of Medina at this time. Not Hakam, Marwan. So Marwan is the governor of Medina at this time. And he will remain the governor of Medina for another 7 years. Then he will be replaced by Sayyid bin Sa'd, who did not curse Ali, or Ahlul Bayt. And then he will be there for about 2 or 3 years, and then Marwan will be brought back. And as I mentioned last week, if you look at Banu Umayyah, as far as administrators of various things, they were very effective administrators. So if you needed an administration, like government administration work done, they were very effective at it. And this is even before Islam. If you look at the hierarchy of Quraysh, Banu Umayyah, were top, next to Banu Hashim, and that competition between the two clans existed. But again, Banu Umayyah were very effective administrators. So this is one of the things that put them in the position that they were in by this point. So Imam Hasan AS, when he gives this khutbah in front of his army, that this is what I've done, and this is what you need to agree to. So he is attacked by people within his own army. And eventually, and he's confined to an area. Eventually he's freed and makes his way back to Medina Munawwara. Important point here to understand also, and again, you have to say things because the environment we live in, and people say stupid stuff, and especially these days with social media, when one person says something very stupid, it spreads very quickly. It used to be, somebody said something stupid and it stayed where he was. Now everybody has a platform, and so one of the stupid statements that we get these days is that, Imam Hussein al-Islam was very much against the decision of Imam Hasan al-Islam, was very upset with his decision. But as we spoke about when we spoke about him when he handed over the Khilafah, and the statements that he made, and the statements that are taken out of context that he made. He did not do any of this for any personal gain. In fact, from a personal standpoint, he lost. I mean, he's walking away from the control of a third of the known world. And he's doing all of this simply to safeguard the blood of the believers. And he is the representative of Ahlul Bayt. So he represents all of Ahlul Bayt. And all of Ahlul Bayt support him, including Imam Hasan AS. And so he eventually, and this is, if you remember, when Imam Hasan AS is headed towards Kufa, or as he's making that decision to go towards Kufa, the people of Makkah who are trying to convince him not to go, this is what they said to him. They said that, you know what the people of Kufa did to your father and to your brother. So why are you going now? Because with Ali radiallahu, what they did was that they basically abandoned his army, refused, and then just left. And then when he's trying to rebuild the army, they gave him a hard time. With Imam Hasan AS, they joined the army, but then when he made the decision that he did, then, they turned against him and tried to kill him. So this is the reference that they're making, that the companions of Rasulullah, when they're trying to convince Imam Hasan AS not to leave Makkah and go to Kufa, this is what they're saying. And they're saying, you know what they did, what can you expect from them? Okay. So, Ahlul Bayt were, and this is one thing that many people get very confused about. By this time, they were very individually wealthy people. If you remember during the Khilafah of Umar, when you had so much spoils of war coming in, there was a hierarchy as to how the spoils of war were distributed. Okay. So you had spoils of war being distributed amongst the fighters, but you also had spoils of war being distributed amongst the people of, or amongst the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even if they fought or did not fight in the various battles. Because some of them by this time are older. You had, certain, you also had distribution to the wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to various other people. The people that received the most, if you look at that hierarchy, were the companions of Badr. But when Umar set this up, the household of Rasulullah, including Imam Hasan and Imam Hussein, received in accordance with the companions of Badr. Even though Imam Hasan and Imam Hussein they weren't even born at the time of Badr, but they received that because of their position as the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we know the famous narration where some of the sons of Umar complained to him, that why do you give to Hassan and Hussein first, before you even give to your own sons? And he says, and his response is that you bring a grandfather and a grandmother, like the grandfather and the grandmother of Hassan and Hussein, and you bring a father and a mother, like the father and the mother of Hassan and Al-Hussein, alayhim salam, then I will give to you first. So this is the affection and the understanding of their status that Umar radiallahu had. So now, again, when he comes back, eventually, Imam Hasan AS, he comes into this environment where you have many companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but most of them are getting older. Many of them have been martyred. And because of the way the political shift has occurred, most of them now are not in any position of any political authority. If you look at the political authorities, they were pretty much from Banu Umayyah, from that household, and you really amongst them did not have any companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There were a few here or there, but they didn't have a lot of authority within the family either. Because it's sort of like, if you think about this, Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahmatullahi alayhi, when he became the king, and the way he became the king was, if you remember Banu Umayyah, and this has been a long time since we talked about this, so I'll reiterate here. So Marwan, as I mentioned earlier, Marwan became the king. He dies, his son Abdul Malik becomes the king. He had three main sons, Abdul Malik, Abdul Aziz, and Muhammad. So the hierarchy, or the king, I guess the descendancy of the king was supposed to be, or where he had dictated that after him, his oldest son would be the king, Abdul Malik, and after Abdul Malik, Abdul Aziz was to become the king. Abdul Aziz died before Abdul Malik died. So after Abdul Malik, his oldest son Walid became the king. Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahmatullah is appointed as governor of Medina at this point, and then removed because of Hajjaj bin Yusuf complaining against him. And then, same thing with Hajjaj, people worship Hajjaj as well. Oh, he's such a good guy and all of these things, and he did this and he did that. He was a tyrant. Rasulullah said he was a tyrant. There's nothing good about a tyrant. That gets into a different kind of, but it's the same mindset. So, Walid was a tyrant. So then after Walid, his brother Suleiman became the king. When Suleiman was about to die, he asked his advisors, he said, look, I've done all of these things, these bad things. Is there any way that I can be forgiven for all of this? And they said, yeah. They said, there's one way, is that you appoint someone decent after you to be the king. Someone good for the Muslims. So this is why he appointed his cousin and brother-in-law, Umar bin Abdul Aziz, to be his successor. But he was the successor for 2¼ years, at the end of which his other cousins, the other sons of Abdul Malik, had him poisoned. Because when he was the king, he was just, and so now they couldn't exploit all this wealth and commit all the crimes that they wanted to and do all the things that they wanted to. They couldn't oppress the people, so they had to get him out of the way. So they poisoned him, and then I forget if it was Hisham or which one took over after him. So so there's a lot of this going on, and poisoning at this point becomes the mode of assassination because of plausible deniability. You poison somebody, they just died. I don't know how they died. How can you can't, there's no, at that point especially, there's no dripping knife. There's no weapon or what's that? The
DNA test.
well, not just DNA, but what they call like the smoking gun. There's no smoking gun, right? There's no smoking gun because, he just died. How do I know how he died? Well, you're the one who fed him. But so there's all this plausible deniability, and especially with the leaders, we had nothing to do with it. The same thing today. Now, though, they've become so emboldened that they kill you in front of everybody, and then they turn around and tell everybody else, oh, we didn't do it. And we see this. That's not us. Yeah, it is. You know. But that's unfortunately what I mean, this is how bad things have deteriorated to. That we go from a position of where at least the leaders had to be able to have some deniability. Now they don't care whether they have deniability or not, just kill them all. So again, this is, and I keep reiterating these points because this is the environment that he's coming back to. So Marwan is governor. Marwan and governor at that time, if you were a governor of an area, you led the salat. You gave the khutbah. You led Eid salat. You gave the Eid khutbah. So, and of course, part of the khutbah was the cursing of Ali. It was Umar bin Abdul Aziz who replaced that part of the khutbah in the second khutbah, where we recite the verse, "Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha." Well, that part was put in by Umar bin Abdul Aziz to replace the part where they used to curse Ali, and not just curse Ali, but they would curse. They say Allah's curse be on Ali and Allah's curse be on Ahlul Bayt. You know, when they really wanted to get things riled up. You literally have companions who are sitting, listening to this, you know, but the environment is such that if they say anything, they will be killed or tortured. And so most of them are silent, and just in silence they suffer like this. Imam Hasan AS, and Imam Hussein AS. So here, as I said before, when I say Imam Hasan AS, he is again representing all of Ahlul Bayt. And so this also is where we're seeing the marginalization of Ahlul Bayt. So that they're being tossed to the side. But this is also the test for those who truly believe. Because if you remember, like even when after Karbala, when Imam Zayn al-Abidin a.s. returns to Medina, you know, he was blacklisted. And anyone who met with him was, he was blacklisted to such an extent that anyone who met with him would eventually be killed or assassinated. So people were afraid to meet him. He had a brilliant way of getting around this, because to make sure that the message is sent forward is that he would buy 1,000 slaves every Ramadan, give them an intense course for a year, and then send them back to free them with money to go back to wherever, you know, they were from, to spread the message. And you know, people ask, well, how can he do this? Again, as I said, by this point, most of Ahlul Bayt are individually wealthy. But it's sort of like today as well. You know, you have to be very careful. Like today, you know, what the reason they're trying to get the digital currency is so they can cancel out anybody they want to at any time. You know, your bank account goes from 10 million to 0, you know, with the press of a button. So they also had to be very careful. But if you look at the way they spent their wealth, these are true representatives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that anyone who came knocking at the door left with much more than they ever expected. These are people who gave without looking back as to how much I have left. To the extent that they would give and there would be nothing left, and they would be, you know, basically hungry that night along with their family. So this will also be an important point to remember when Imam Hasan AS is eventually assassinated, because it will be an inside job. So of course, as I said, Imam Hasan AS, which again, he's representing all of Ahlul Bayt, so none of Ahlul Bayt are coming and listening to these khutbahs. I mean, if somebody's standing up in the khutbah and cursing your father, you gonna go to that khutbah? No. And this is for us. And our fathers are nothing compared to Sayyidina Ali, karamallahu wajh. And our love for our fathers is nothing compared to the love of Hassan and Hussein al-Islam for their father. So, people try to make it sound like, they would go and pray behind Marwan. And I mean, if I don't even have to insult someone directly, indirectly insult somebody here. You think they're going to come back here for Jummah Salat and pray behind me? No. I mean, just, again, people worship kings and tyrants, and so they're willing to change anything to fit their agenda. And so one time, as we mentioned last week, Marwan's giving the khutbah, and of course, he looks out in the crowd, and he sees that Imam Hasan AS is not there. So he knows where he is. Imam Hasan AS during the khutbah time would go into the house of Bibi Fatima Salamullahi alayha, which was right there at the masjid. So he sent a man to him with a message, and this we mentioned last week, but I'll say it again. And so the man goes to Imam Hasan AS and he says that I've come to you with a message from Marwan. He says, what's the message? And his message was, he says that the example of you and your father is like that of a mule. If you ask the mule, who is your father, the mule says, my mother is a horse. So those who know what a mule is, the mule father is a donkey, the mother is a horse. So this is what he says to Imam Hasan AS. He says, the example of you and your father is like that of the mule. That's the approval. Again, this is the person who is standing on the mimbar of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina Munawwara, in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because there are people today as well, the imams there now, they're all bought and paid for, and they're all messed up. They all worship the kings, and whatever the king says, and even if they say something indirectly against the king, what do? End up in jail for 10 years, right? I mean, just example, a few months ago. He didn't even say anything major. 10 years jail. And even if they ask a question, how is this happening? People disappear. In 91, when we went for Hajj, me and my brother, we were walking around Medina. This person was taking us around, showing us. He said, the imam of this masjid, we don't even know where he is now anymore. All he did was in Jummah, he made the statement of, and this is 91, so the first Gulf War. All those people, all these militaries are coming in from here and Europe and everywhere else. And all he did in his khutbah was, how are these people in our land? Because, the normal khutbah, they never write, the imams there don't write khutbahs themselves. It's read. It's given to them by...
Management.
Yes. Yep, exactly, management. It's given to them, and all they do is they read it. Which is funny because, you see where they stumble upon reading it, which obviously means they didn't write it themselves.
Even these days, muftis also, if you ask some stuff, they will tell, this is not allowed from management, I can tell.
Yes, yeah, management. Yep, which is a good term, just like business. It's a business.
They're going to lose their job.
Yep, exactly.
Lose their job.
Exactly. Or their life. But if you're in that position, then it becomes obligatory on you to fulfill the rights of that position. Otherwise, don't take that position. And so, So he said, yeah, that's all he said, and immediately after Salat, the police came and escorted him away, and no one knows where he is now. So again, when so people say that, oh, how would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow someone, indecent to be in that position? Just like these, what's that, prosperity gospelists. How would God give that much money to someone if he's not decent? Okay. So the same mindset is, how would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow someone like this? These are all tests for us. And this is exactly what Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu anhu said when the first civil war was about to start. That this is a test for you, whether you follow the wife of Rasulullah or whether you follow Allah. And the hadith is in Bukhari 3 times, in 3 places. Now this is a test. So these are tests for us, whether we worship the superficial authority or we worship Allah. Do we love Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then the ones that they want us to love, which includes Ahlul Bayt, at the top of that list. And if we don't, then, we are in the same category as Abdullah ibn Ubay and all the other hypocrites. So, just because they're in that position doesn't mean that they're good. Again, these are tests for the people. Just like, Allah says that, He has made your wives and your offspring's test for you. Everything in life is a test. And the Khilafah, which is an extension of Allah's justice and His mercy, ended with Imam Hasan AS handing over the rule and will not come back until Imam Mahdi al-Islam comes. You will, in between, have some decent rulers, but even that time really has passed. Because that was during the age of the kings, there were some decent kings. Again, this is the age of tyrants, and nothing but tyrants. So again, I keep coming back. This is the environment. This is what we got to remember. This is where Imam Hasan AS is coming back to. This isn't, he's coming back to, roses and petals and gardens and just, easy life. He's coming back to this environment, having to live in this environment, and trying to make sure that the true message of Islam is propagated within this environment. And being subjugated to being blacklisted, to the extent that people are cautious in even meeting him because they know that there may be repercussions for even meeting and siding with him. There are moments there where you see some of the pressures lifted, but they're just temporary moments. And, so as I said, so the first 7 years that he's back is constant. And as I mentioned a while back as well, if you remember, we've talked about this before. If you take Imam Hasan and Imam Hussein al-Islam and you put them together, in essence, you get Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From the waist up, Imam Hasan al-Islam is a perfect reflection of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, physically and character-wise. From the waist down, Imam Hussein al-Islam is a perfect reflection of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, physically as well as his steadfastness and character in that. And so you can imagine the emotions that are generated when you have those who were there at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when they see Imam Hasan al-Islam. And Marwan quickly realizes this himself, which is why he bans him from coming to the masjid of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So, you know, and unfortunately most of us don't even know this. I mean, there are many things even before this that we should know that we don't know. But this is also why it becomes so easy for these modern day deviants to manipulate us. Oh, no, we're just all Muslim. Everybody's Muslim. Well, everybody can claim to be Muslim. It doesn't make you Muslim. You know, otherwise, why is there Surah Tawbah in the Quran? Why is there Surah Munafiqeen in the Quran? They also claim to be Muslim. And Surah Tawbah is not a short surah. These aren't, you know, the Quran is not a history book. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran is a living book that we are experiencing all the time, whether we know it or not. Everything we see around us is in there. If this wasn't something that would continue on, the hypocrisy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not have mentioned it. There would be no need to mention it. You know, one and done, and that's it. That's not what, but we see this all around us. And the problem, and the reason, again, it's important, you know, it's just like in anything. You know, the first step in fixing something is to acknowledge that there is a problem. If I can't acknowledge there's a problem, then how am I going to fix it? Same thing for tawbah. The first step in making tawbah is to acknowledge that there is something wrong. If I can't acknowledge something wrong, then how am I going to make tawbah? So if we can't even acknowledge, you know, the issues that are going on in front of us, that yes, there are deviants, there are those who try to minimize the position of Rasulullah, who try to minimize the position of Ahlul Bayt, you know, and do all of these things. Some of them blatantly, some of them very subtly, but they're there. So if we can't acknowledge that people like this exist, then we ourselves become trapped into that. And so when they come and with their flowery talk and, you know, and their silver tongues and talk about, oh no, we're all Muslim and we just need to do this and that, the ahkam of the Quran, that's only 10%. The orders of the do's and don'ts is only 10% of the Quran. All the rest of the Quran deals with reasoning, and even within the ahkam, all of the Quran deals with the love of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and sacrificing for that love. Any questions?
I'm thinking, Doctor.
Okay, good. Yeah.
The royal bloodline still continues today, or is it what today the kings and all that are just the designation of the British?
The question is whether the royal bloodline continues today. If you look at the royal bloodlines, you know, the British royal bloodline continues. Okay, even the presidents here are connected to that bloodline. Okay, but from an Islamic perspective, you had various dynasties, and Rasulullah, there are various narrations that talk about this, and you know, of course, immediately after the Khilafah, the first royal bloodline is Banu Umayyah, and even there you have a split because you have what were known as the Safwanid Banu Umayyah, and then you have the Marwani Banu Umayyahs. So the Safwan are from Banu Safwan, or Abu Safwan. You have, the first one is Ma'biyah, and then you have Yazid, and then you have his son Ma'biyah, who really, you know, like, he was king for 40 days. But he didn't even accept the kingdom, you know, because he said, I see what my father did, and he had decency in him. So he said, no, I'm not going to take this. So then you have the civil war, and then you have, you know, Marwan, and then that line. So Banu Umayyah, if you look at their whole reign, it was not very long. It was like, it was 83 and a third year, which is 1,000 months. That's how long Banu Umayyah reigned, was 1,000 months. Okay. After which you have Banu Abbas. So Banu Abbas took over control in the year 132. So they overthrew Banu Umayyah, took control, and they also were even though they're from the lineage of Abdullah ibn Abbas, but they betrayed the household of Rasulullah, even though they are an extension of, a branch of that household, kind of an extension of it rather. But they betrayed the sons of Hassan and Hussein al-Islam in order to attain their power. And I won't get into the detail of that today. So they reigned for, I think, about 400 years. But you'll see after a couple of hundred years of reigning, of their rule, the kingdom starts splitting up. So Banu Umayyah basically, with the exception of the time of Abdullah ibn Zubair, which was 9 years, Banu Umayyah ruled over all of the Islamic empire. Banu Abbas in the beginning also. And then they, after a couple of hundred years, you had parts breaking off. And then, but everybody still accepted Banu Abbas as the central ruling, or kind of giving allegiance to them. But they were, but you look at it and they were kind of left to a small area. So, when Genghis Khan, or Halaku, his grandson, Hulagu, when he attacked Baghdad, so Banu Abbas were the kings in Baghdad. And of course, when the Mongols came, but you still had, but you had the Muslim empire being broken up into various kingdoms. They were all kings. Some of them called themselves amirs, some of them called themselves sultans, some of them called themselves something else, but they were all kings. Okay. And so each area had, so you have like the Safavids, the Ayyubids, from Salahuddin Ayyubi. Yeah, so you had the Ayyubids, you had the Seljuks, the Mamluks. So all of these various areas, the various kings and various bloodlines. So the kings today, like the kings in Saudi Arabia, they have no connection to the kings back then. And these are British plants. These are all British plants. So even the king in Kuwait, the emirs in Dubai and all these areas, and even like the king of Jordan, British plants. Because if you look at their history, and I'll end with this, unless there are other questions. If you look at their history, in the early 1900s, and this has actually been going on even before, when the British sent Lawrence of Arabia to Arabia, his whole mission was to prop up the Wahhabi movement. Because, if you remember, this is the third kingdom of the House of Saud. The first kingdom is when they made that alliance with Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. So so if you look at all of the grand muftis of Saudi Arabia, they're all descendants of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. Okay. So they made that alliance. Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab at-Tamimi al-Najdi. So he's from the family of the man who was disrespectful to Rasulullah ﷺ, who Rasulullah said that from him and from his lineage will come all of these people, who will go through Islam like an arrow through its prey. There's a long narration. So meaning that they will have nothing to do with the religion. So all of them are from that line, but the deal was that you handle the religious aspect and we prop you up for that, and we handle the kingdom and you prop us up for this. And this is why they give that fatwa, oh, you can't say anything against the king. Yeah. King is sacred. Alright? So, and you see pictures, they accuse us of shirk when I kissed the hand of my sheikh. And you got videos of, when MBS, before he became crown prince, Naif was the crown prince, and he's going to go meet Naif, and he's kissing his hand and touching his feet. Okay. And that's not shirk, because that's their man doing it. But if I do that same thing with my sheikh just out of adab, shirk. So then, so they propped them up. And then, and at the same time they were paying, Abdul Aziz, who's the father of all of these, they were paying him 5,000 pounds every month. And when his people found out that he's being paid by the British, they came to him and he said, no, this is jizya. I'm taking jizya from them. All right? At the same time, they gave £1 million to Sharif, who was the Ottoman appointed governor of Mecca, of Hijaz. They paid him £1 million to get this revolt against the Ottomans. And then they gave, and with the promise that they would make him the Khalifa. Okay. And then when he got the revolt going, they gave the green light to Abdul Aziz and his men to come and attack Mecca. Okay. And then, so then Abdul Aziz goes to, Sharif goes to them, like Sharif in Pakistan, same mud that they're created, or filth that they're created from. So Aziz goes to them and says, well, you promised me all this. They said, okay, fine. We'll give one of your sons Iraq, and one of your sons will give him Jordan. At that time it was called something else. In Iraq, that son eventually got overthrown, and then Saddam came and all the other stuff happened. In Jordan, you still have that bloodline now. So all these kings are the sons.
Okay, Abdullah.
Yeah. So all these kings in Jordan are the sons of the people that were traitors to the Muslims.
So Dr. Muhammad, you said King Faisal from Iraq came from...
Yeah, he was the son of
okay.
he was the son of the grandson of Sharif.
Okay.
Yeah. And the British are the one who promised him. Said, okay, you can...
There was a King Faisal 1 and 2, then...
Yeah, one of them was only for a short time.
Then, what the name? Abdul Karim Qasim came after this.
Yes.
Then Saddam got rid of him.
Yes.
And he was on power.
Yep. Yeah. I couldn't remember who was in between there. Abdul Karim.
Abdul Karim Qasim.
Yeah. So Faisal, one of them had mental issues.
King Faisal, I think the father died, then the son come. I think they killed his son. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah.
But then Abdul Karim Qasim came along. Then Saddam got rid of Abdul Karim Qasim. So,
Yeah.
I think.
And then the same people who put Saddam in power are the one who took Saddam out of power. So, it's all this game with the blood of the Muslims. That's all it is. So, I'll end here today unless there's some other question. Everyone good? Inshallah. So we'll continue next week, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us and help us and fill our hearts with His true love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love. And may He give victory to our brothers and sisters in Palestine, and may He destroy those that are the oppressors. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.